Let me tell you about the fact that there was this first question that was asked of me by a student. Now, you need to know, as John says, and there's a couple of initials up there, Juris Doctorate and MDiv, so a little bit of life that I was living before I went to Calvin Seminary as president. And I was president-elect for like 15 months. Really long time, 15 months. Still serving in the local church, wonderful church that allowed us to do that. I went through 15 different interviews to be president of Calvin Theological Seminary. In the church tradition that we're a part of, you do things decently and in order, and then you do them again. That's what I said. So 15 different interviews. And then I'm in the classroom with Scott Jose, who's the director for the Center for Excellence in Preaching. It's first year students that are there. The week before, Professor Jeff Wyman talked to them about understanding the world of the Bible and then thinking about what it meant to bridge that gap to now. And the next week, Scott Jose and I are there, and I'm introduced as a professor, and we're talking about how to really craft a message. Well, after the class, the student comes up to me, and this is once again my really first class, and this is the first student coming up to me after class, and the student asked me, "May I ask you a question?" My heart's beating fast. I think, I'm going to remember this question forever. This is the very first question. I wonder what insight, what wisdom, what knowledge I could give to this student in this moment. And I said, "Certainly, you may ask your question." And the student looked at me and said very clearly and very directly, "So how do you pronounce your last name anyway?" So, Maiden Blick, and here we go. Just a little bit. See if it's locked out. Oh, there it is. I was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm a son of Dutch immigrants, actually. My dad came over when he was 13 in 1949. My mom when she was 16 in 1957. They ended up in the Fulton Morrison, Illinois area, and then when they got married, they wanted to start a life together, and so that's the area of Kalamazoo, Michigan. Then I was raised in Fulton, Illinois, which is, it looks as big as Chicago, but it's not. It's 3,000 people right along the Mississippi River. It's a farming community, and I grew up on a hog farm, a 50-acre hog farm. I then went to school at Trinity Christian College in Palos Heights, Illinois. A great place to go, as is other schools like Redeemer. My wife is from Lansing, Illinois, and that's where we met. And I graduated with a philosophy major with history and English minors. Not that that really matters. But what do you do with a philosophy major? Well, you have to go on for schooling. I had to go back to grad school. So where I went was actually the University of Florida Law School and worked as an attorney later on. So this is a little picture of that, Florida. The reason why I went to Florida is my parents actually sold the family farm and between my junior and senior year, and we could get in-state tuition at the University of Florida, so it was a good place to go. Then I'm a practicing attorney with a firm of Stewart called Bernard in Palm Beach, Florida, right along there. And actually, that county, by the way, is as big as the state of Rhode Island. And my background is as a practicing attorney and former elder life. One of the stories I'll tell you here, because maybe you're even feeling prompted by God even about here, or you feel the promptings in different ways. Let me tell you a story about promptings. It's about after working as an attorney for a year that I felt really a stir of God to go into pastoral ministry. And we had just gone through law school. I was practicing at a nice firm in Palm Beach, Florida. And, what do you do with these stirrings? And I recognized those stirrings from before. I recognized that I had those stirrings as a teenager. And I say this honestly and openly, and actually to my family as well, that I grew up in a community, a church, and even a family that had something called roast preacher for Sunday dinner. Basically carved up the message or carved up church. And I didn't want to be anybody's lunch. And I just say that and let that settle in, because the way we honor leaders is watched by our children and eventually our grandchildren. And if we want to have people understand what the church is to be, it's sometimes how we speak about the church and its leaders. And so I didn't want to be, a pastor. So went on, as you already know, to law school and the like. But I can't get rid of this stirring. And so I'm going to have the talk with my wife. And the talk with my wife is going to go along the lines of, Jackie, I love you. I consider you, we're partners in this. So I want us to think about moving to Grand Rapids, Michigan, so I can go to Calvin Seminary. We've been married 30 years, and she's a wise woman. She actually works, as we finish up kind of transition with a daughter in high school, at Trinity Christian College, director of the Career Center. And I basically said, I've heard from God, we need to go. And then she basically said this, well, I love you, but I've also heard from God. I put you through law school, and that took 3 years. You've only been a lawyer for 1 year. Try harder being a lawyer. And that's what happened. And it took 5 more years for us to be on the same page at the same time for really moving forward. And so I just encourage you that as you share your promptings and you do that, so that's where it was. Attended Calvin Theological Seminary, did a year internship with Reverend Mike Ritzman on the first CRC of Calvary. Our son was born in Florida. Our daughter is actually dual. She was born in Canada. That's great. And for some of you who are around here long enough, I don't know how many of you that would be, I came out about the same time as a person named Phil Leo, who worked as an intern at Maranatha for a whole year. And obviously it's about the same time as Darryl and Barb. 1995, returned to Northern Illinois, and that's really in terms of New Lenox, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. It's a southwest suburb of that, and it's a community that when we came there was 12,500 people. During the time we were there, it grew to be about 25,000 people, and really it was a moment too where I saw God open up doors. And so this morning is a little bit about testifying and testimony. We had gone back to Grand Rapids, Michigan for graduation. We're then heading back to Calgary to finish up the internship. They would pay me, so that was part of the rationale. I'm staying with my mother-in-law in Lansing, Illinois, which is nearby that location. And I get a phone call from the regional leader of home missions. A number of years it was Ben Van de Zandy, and now Adrian in this area, Adrian Van Giesen. And he called me and said, Jewel, there's a church called Orland Park Christian Reformed Church, and they're thinking about being a parent of a new church. And they haven't committed to anything, but I would like you to come since you're in the area. They don't know what people interested in church planning look like, and, so I want you to come and just kind of, you don't have to say anything. Now, as a former attorney and pastor-to-be, to tell a person you don't need to say anything, that's like, how is that supposed to work? But I said, okay. And so I walked in to this church that was in transition because it was June, and in that system, their elders and deacons transitioned that time of year. So a third of this council is new. But I walked into the executive committee of that church and started talking, and so did Jim Osterhaus. And so this church that never had said, hey, we're going to be for sure doing this at all, what they did say was that we'll think about it, we'll pray about it. But God did something in that night. So that night, this church that, once again, a third of the elders and deacons are new, they're just hearing about this project, possibility. They say, oh, that's what we ought to do. They didn't refer it to a committee. They didn't refer it for additional study. They said, yes, we'll be a sponsoring church of a new church. Yes, we'll actually not only do that in words, but we'll do this in deeds. We'll commit over 6 years $120,000 for this project. And thirdly, a person who's just graduated from Calvin Seminary, we'd like to hire that person. Call that person to be the church planner. All in one night, all three of those decisions. You know what you call that? A miracle. And an open door which Jackie and I went through, and that really was the start of New Life Church.